Today I'm going to be making a quilted coaster. One of the things I would suggest though is that you do double check how big your actual mug is and then make your pattern based on the size of the cup. You want to make sure that you actually like the fabric as well, because you're going to see quite a bit of the fabric underneath the cup surrounding the mug. So it's important that it's a pattern that you're going to actually enjoy seeing on a regular basis. So here I actually have my mug piece cut out. Based on the size of my mug, I estimated how much extra I wanted to have as the coaster size, and then went ahead and cut it out of graph paper. I also went ahead and sprayed down the actual pieces. I do have the batting here placed on top of the cotton, so cotton sandwiched with a layer of batting, then cotton on top. Sprayed it down with water to make sure it was relatively flat, and then used my ruler to continue flattening it out just to make sure I had most of the wrinkles. I wanted it to be as sandwiched and flat as possible before actually proceeding to pinning it down, double checking the external size for the edge. And after I did this, I then beveled the edges by folding each corner down at a 45-degree angle and then using either clips or pins. Some people use an adhesive as well just to keep the quilt pieces in place before actually continuing with the pinning and the sewing and the top stitching. And I would recommend the top stitching before you actually go ahead and finalize your binding, because I do find the centerpiece will shift as you proceed throughout the project versus pinning it, then doing the edging and the binding and adding top stitching after. I do find it can pucker or buckle sometimes. I find that using the quilting freehand foot really does the trick when it comes to doing all this free motion work. I did actually work with it originally where I dropped the feed dogs, but I did find that after a while I just had better control if I kept the feed dogs up and running, and then the pacing and the length of the stitches remained the same. So it's your preference, but when you do the top stitch quilting, and I'm very much looking forward to experimenting on an actual full-sized quilt, I prefer to use feed dogs up, free motion foot, and just then guide it with the hands. Sometimes I did have to actually stop, move the project, lift the foot, reposition, and then continue. I think this just offered better control in the long run because I wanted to make sure that if nothing else, at least the stitches were correct. And there in the corner, you can see there's a little bit of puckering. That I should have actually done and addressed before I even began. So I didn't use enough pins or enough adhesive to make sure it was actually lying flat before beginning the top stitching, and ultimately it did sort of, I had to pay for it in the end. One thing I really liked about this project was that it was really good use of extra old threads that you have that you want to get rid of. There's usually one or two of those colors that you just don't know what to do with, and I do tend to keep a lot on hand, just so that I have, like, you know, the thread that matches every single project you might ever have in your whole life. But I did actually end up using about 2 spools, finishing off 2 spools that were just sort of scrap threads, and experimenting with the color and the placement of threads. This was also an experiment of using some of the other stitches that my machine offers that I really don't get to play with in a lot of my projects. And ta-da! Here we go! Finished project! Thank you for watching. It's a fun way to use up your scraps. And just remember, our future has no ceiling.